vocpodcasts.com.
Hi, buddy. How's it going?
This is an SOS distress call from the mining ship Red Dwarf. The crew is dead, killed by a radiation leak. Luckily, video records of the survivors' attempts to return to Earth still exist. These blokes, Brent and Paul, are ready to tell you all about them. You're listening to Tongue Tied, a Red Dwarf podcast. Stand by for comment and analysis on your favorite episodes of Red Dwarf.
Good, Benny.
Featuring
Boys from the Dwarf.
Brent Johnson.
Hey, smackhead.
And Paul Towsley.
Better make myself look big.
And now, from the drive room, the boys from the Dwarf.
Look out, Ant. The slime's coming home.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Tongue Tied, a Red Dwarf podcast. I'm Brent.
And I'm Paul, and this is our 7th episode, where we'll be discussing Series 7 of Red Dwarf, which aired from January 17th to March 7th, 1997. The stories in this season are
Ticket to Ride, Stoke Me a Clipper, Ouroboros, Duck Soup, Blue, Beyond a Joke, Epideme, and Nanarchy. Thanks again to our special guest last month, Steven Shapansky of Radio Free Skaro and Doctor Who The Memory Cheats. If you missed it, you can download our Series 6 review and check that one out.
This month's guest is another Doctor Who podcaster, but what sets him apart from the hundreds of others is that his show's a video podcast, and very entertaining and thought-provoking at that. He's the host of the Minute Doctor Who podcast, or Schmidwarp, as it's also known, and he's here to discuss Series 7 with us right now, Luke Harrison. Hi, Luke.
Hello. Good to be with you guys.
Across the pond.
Yes, here in sunny Oxford.
Sunny and warm, you said, right?
Yeah, no, it's been astoundingly hot, but by British standards. So I've been running around working in shorts for the last, 3 or 4 weeks. Particularly, I've been doing a bit of stuff in London, and that's just been absolutely roasting. But by global standards, it's probably quite mild, really, as British weather always is.
I guess we can go around and talk about what we've been up to lately, maybe shows you've been watching or movies or anything like that.
I'd really like to hear about the concerts that you've been to recently there, Brent.
Oh, good Lord. I've got a friend that I work with. She also has a part-time job at the local concert venue. And so she's given me like discounted VIP tickets for some of the shows recently. And so I went to see some of my family last night, and they were joking with me. So are you off tour now? Are you, because over the last week, we've seen 3 shows. 4 shows if you count a local thing, but Goo Goo Dolls, Daughtry, Plain White Tees. That was one show. Another show was Lionel Richie with CeeLo Green, and the other show was Paramore with Fall Out Boy. So,
does Paramore have new material? I'm sorry I don't keep track of that, but I seem to remember them from years, like not years and years ago, but recently in the early 2000s they were quite a hit, and then I've really not paid attention since then.
They put out their last one about a year ago, I guess, so they're still riding on that one.
And that was a fun show?
Oh, yeah, they were all great. All the shows were great.
Killer. I've been whoring myself out musically this last month as well. I've played with several bands other than my normal bands, and one of them is a band that does all of their songs in Italian. And I found that very interesting. It's kind of a cool thing to do. I've played with them before, but it's pop music, but they sing all in Italian, and we played in the Italian Heritage Festival in Buffalo, New York. So that was one of the interesting ones. And then I also got to sit in with my other co-host, Rickadelic. He sings in That Party Band, and I sat in with them in July as well. So I've been all over the place musically this year.
That's cool.
And Luke, what do you do other than Doctor Who video podcasts?
Well, there's not much of that at the moment. Well, as people may know, I'm currently gearing up for a proper season of episodes, which is the first time I've attempted that. I like my movies. There's a few great independent cinemas here in Oxford, and there's also one in London that I pop down to visit on occasion with some of the guys from the Doctor Who podcast. So recently, and you'll think this is weird, I've got this far through life and only just seen these two movies, but Alien and Aliens, I've watched those quite recently. Top Gun, here in Oxford very recently. I'd forgotten quite how cheesy it was. And then in terms of films that are out at the moment, this past week I've just been to see Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Have either of you guys seen that yet?
No, was that good?
Well, I didn't really enjoy Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and so I was a bit unsure. But this was really good. This was for me. This was a much better movie. Really interesting, kind of exploring this the declining human culture and the upcoming ape culture, and the kind of conflict between the two, and the ones on each side who wanted peace and the ones who wanted war. So. Obviously, we know where it's heading. We know that eventually the apes do take over, but it's still interesting to kind of explore that kind of conflict in the middle period of what's going on. So, and the mocap stuff is just fantastic. Great performances from Andy Serkis and I've forgotten the other guy, Toby somebody, who plays the bad ape chap.
Tim Roth?
No. So Tim Roth was in the terrible. Tim Burton version from about 12, 13 years ago. Toby Kebbell, I think his name is. He's the other main ape guy. So he and Andy Serkis are and there's lots of them doing the whole mocap thing. But they're the two main characters, and they are very distinct characters. But obviously then rendered on screen as CGI apes, and it works very well.
I think the only Planet of the Apes movie I saw was the original Charlton Heston version, and that's so I'm lost. Are all of these movies prequels to that film then?
Well, I don't think you get better than that. Well, yes and no. They sort of are, but they sort of aren't. In the original, what would you call it? What's a series of 5 films called? Anyway, they did an origin story in the 4th movie, so this is sort of a prequel, but it's also a reboot.
Oh, so they're retelling something that was already there with the modern technology. Yes,
because the story they told of how the Planet of the Apes came about in the original series of films doesn't mesh with what they've done this time round. The only thing that's in common is there's an ape called Caesar, but apart from that, it's quite different as to how it comes about. And then none of them have any relation at all to the Tim Burton fiasco.
Yeah, that's on my list. I have all of them on Blu-ray. I think there's 7, if you count the old ones, and that's on my list to see, but haven't got to it yet.
Yeah.
I finally finished. Luke, you might know this, but it's a show called The Omega Factor, back in the 70s.
Yeah, no, it's one I've heard of, particularly recently because Big Finish have just announced that they're doing a new series for audio, but I've never seen it myself, so I have no idea what it's about.
Yeah, I just finished that. It's pretty good. I was talking a little bit about it last episode. It's sort of a prequel, if you will, of like the X-Files. It's kind of like the X-Files. But the only person I knew in it or recognized was Louise Jameson is one of the leads in there. Okay. And this may have been where she went right after Doctor Who. I'm not sure. It's about a year after she left Doctor Who. So
great.
And she's the lead, so she has a lot more involvement with the storytelling than just being the hunter, obviously, I'm hoping.
Yeah, she plays a scientist in this one. So she's sort of the
Lee
Scully.
Oh, yeah. Since the last time we talked, of course, I was in the grips of World Cup action and got to watch all the rest of those games, and that was a lot of fun.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I mean, this is my first time around for being a World Cup fan. And, of course, every team that I rooted for in every game I watched, that was the team that lost. So I really don't know what I'm talking about as far as football is concerned. But I guess, I'm looking forward to the American football's return. We're in the midst of the training camp season here in the States, and that'll be fun for that. But at the same time, I've been trying to find soccer matches, and we've got some MLS stuff that is only infrequently broadcast in the States. Also, since the last time we talked, I sat down and watched Series 7, 8, and 9 of Red Dwarf, and that was a lot of fun. So I'm caught up with everything that we're supposed to be doing for this Tongue-Tied podcast, and I have downloaded Series 10, but I haven't watched it yet. So hopefully in the next couple months, I'll be watching Series 10.
Excellent. All right, so you guys want to get started?
Yeah, why not?
We'll get started with Series 7, and the first episode is Ticket to Ride.
Ship's log update, Friday, AM. The battle with our future selves has had the most terrible consequence. Wiped out? Crichton, man, they can't be.
I'm afraid so, sir. The laser cannon breached the main water tank and flooded supply deck B. They didn't stand a chance.
Yeah, but surely...
There was nothing we could do to save them, sir.
So you mean... now we've got no poppadoms at all?
No poppadoms, no curries. All the Indian food supplies have been totaled.
I'll have to survive without them, then. I'll have salads.
Sir, you're in shock. You don't know what you're saying.
After all, it's only curry.
Only curry. The enormity of it hasn't sunk in. You must mourn, sir. Don't you see? You must mourn.
Curries.
Oh, sir. Get it out. Cry like a baby.
Which aired January 17th, 1997, written by Doug Naylor and directed by Ed Bye. Curry supplies are dwindling on the newly revamped Starbug, and the crew travel back to Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, and accidentally kill a historical figure, Lee Harvey Oswald. And I gotta say, this one's my favorite of all 8 of these episodes. I remember this one very distinctly back in the day because I had been introduced to Red Dwarf and saw a lot of Series 1 and 2 and some of 6. And then this is the first one that I actually watched. PBS did a fund drive thing and showed Ticket to Ride, Stoke Me a Clipper, and Ouroboros. And I remember watching those like when they were, well, maybe not when they were broadcast overseas, but definitely back in this era in the late 90s. And I have very fond feelings about the Curry paradox and the whole Kennedy assassination conspiracy theory and all the kind of stuff that goes into that. So what did you guys like about this episode?
I think I possibly agree. It's definitely one of the better episodes of the series. And it's I think again it was the first episode of this series that I ever saw. It's difficult to remember now what exactly my experience with Red Dwarf was. It was repeated quite regularly on BBC Two, which was obviously its original home. But they always seemed to repeat the same things. And so Camille was always on. Like, that one episode of Series 4 always turned up. And I think this was the only episode of Series 7 that I'd seen on the BBC before I bought the DVD. Most of the later series of Red Dwarf I saw for the first time when they came out on DVD, as I was getting into the show in the early 2000s, I think. So I have kind of fond memories of this one as being my introduction to Series 7. And that particularly, obviously, the major departure is it's shot much more like a film, and it without the studio audience, and so it looks very different from other Red Dwarf. And this one has a great plot at the heart of it as well. And having since been to Dallas and stood on the grassy knoll, I can say that where they shot it is far too flat. Because in reality, the road was actually going slightly down a hill and round a bend, whereas they shot it on an airfield, and so it's quite flat. But aside from that, I think it's done very, very well, considering they shot it on an airfield in the UK somewhere.
I love how there's a thing that Doctor Who does. It's done it several times where they take a real and unexplained event and they show that it was really the Doctor that was behind it or something like that. And like the end of the Visitation or countless other examples that I'm sure Luke could probably rattle off the top of his head there.
Which I won't.
But Red Dwarf does that here by showing that Kennedy himself shot Kennedy on the grassy knoll. So that was, and my favorite scene actually in this one was the conversation that Lister had with Kennedy in the back of the police wagon.
But I can help, man. I mean, Mr. President, man. I mean, say it.
How can you help?
Well, come with us back to Dallas in November '63. Be a second gunman. The gunman behind the grassy knoll.
You mean assassinate myself?
Yeah, it'll drive the conspiracy nuts crazy, but they'll never figure it out.
But I still have a future here. Jackie left me, but when I get out, I can still make a contribution to the world.
See this airport? Idlewild Airport. In our reality, they renamed it JFK, after you. Where I come from, you're a liberal icon, and that's the person you should be. But if you're going to be that person, you're going to have to sacrifice your life.
And only then will my reputation be restored in history.
And I can get a smeg and curry.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
That was a great scene. A little more dramatic than the show normally is, but I love this one. This is one of my favorites.
Yeah, well, it does sort of. I've just before we've come on, I've just rewatched the documentary that's on the DVD about the whole season, and they do talk about the fact that this season more than ever they were going down the line of comedy drama rather than just sitcom. And there you do get those moments like the conversation between Lister and Kennedy where it does take a turn for the more serious. There's still laughs in that scene, particularly when Lister reveals what he wants Kennedy to do. But there are a few more of those poignant conversations in this series of Red Dwarf, which I know some people don't like, but I think it works quite well.
So some of the other scenes that I was a big fan of are the depiction of Americans. The FBI breaks in and holds them all at gunpoint, and they say, hands on your heads, and of course the cat's hands go someplace else. And then the Americans, as soon as they disappear, they just start shooting at nothing. And then, there's another little disturbance, and they start shooting at nothing again. So I guess Americans are always shooting at something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like the intro, the very beginning with Dave's video blog about, what happened at the end of Series 6, and he's trying to explain this paradox, and it just keeps destroying the cameras.
Ship's log 1. Now, just recently, we came across a craft piloted by ourselves from 15 years into the future. We had a bit of an argument, and they attacked us. We were no match. They killed us and destroyed everything on board ship, including the time drive, which meant there was no time drive for them to have in the future, to bring back into the past to destroy the future of their past selves in the present. Put simply, by killing us, they killed themselves, because once we were dead, it was impossible for us to become them in the future and return in time to kill ourselves in the past, even though it was the present.
Oh, Meg, have you been trying to explain about our future selves again, sir?
I just thought I'd give it one more go.
That's the third camera this week. The machines just can't take it, sir.
Yes.
Well, instead, he has to just make it simple. We're, out of supplies. Come and help us.
Yeah.
I guess I'd have to say that my favorite aspect is the whole JFK conspiracy thing. Is that that JFK is in fact the second gunman, and that was a creative, if not farcical, kind of thing to do. It's not necessarily funny, but it's definitely very creative and an interesting way of retelling history.
I watched this on Netflix streaming because I don't have the DVD yet. It's on the way. I've only had it on VHS. And so I had to use Netflix this time to watch it. And the version that's on there, along with a couple of more on this season, the laugh track of the audience is missing.
Oh, it's
And
missing? Because I was watching it on Netflix too, and I just assumed that they were trying something new and didn't have a laugh track at all.
Oh no, there is one on the video, but not on Netflix. It's really weird.
There are, I think, without having the DVD menu in front of me, there are 4 versions of this episode on the DVD. Because there's the extended version and the remastered version and the extended and remastered version and the original version. Because there's let's see, I think there are 3 episodes out of the 8 which have extended versions. There's Ticket to Ride, which is about 10 minutes longer. There's a whole extra scene after they get back to the to Starbug when they've actually got all the curries. And then Duck Soup has 2 or 3 minutes extra, and then Ouroboros has 2 or 3 minutes extra. And then with the remastered version, that was when they had a chance to go back and, when the DVD came out, add in some decent CGI. So Chris Field was like, let's revisit my terrible Starbug CGI model and do it again. So there's a couple of episodes with those remastered visual effects shots in as well on the DVD. But yeah, so Ticket to Ride has 4 versions, and the extended versions are the ones that they've taken the laughter track off, I think. That's it.
Yeah, that's
on the Netflix is definitely the one with the primitive CGI, and that's definitely some of the notes that I took down this time, because I was just like, these CGs are laughably bad. They look like something that we could make on our iPads now, and it's, it's, of course it's 15 years ago that we're talking about, but at the same time there was great CG from stuff like Jurassic Park that was just off the chart, and now that you say that they've gone back and redid it, I'm really looking forward to going and checking that out. So thanks for letting me know that there's 4 versions of this episode there.
I saw that the deleted scene is on the Netflix version where because normally it ends where they're kicking Lister's ass behind the fence over there, and now they've added that scene at the end where he gets like 3.5 tons of curry, and then they jettison him out of the ship.
The curry supplies. There was no debris. So you get it? No little bits of floating crate. They weren't destroyed in the flood.
Well, what happened to them then?
I took them. At some point in the future, I must go back to the past and bring all the curry supplies to the present. Capiche? I'm lost in deep space. Over 3 million years from home. No life. No bed. No nothing. Just me and 3.5 tons of curry. Fan-smeggin-tastic.
Yeah, no, but I think the version that's on the DVD, and I didn't watch the extended version this time, so I'm not. But I think there is about 10 minutes more material, so it's not just an extra bit bolted on. They clearly shot a lot more than they could fit into a half-hour. Well, I think, what is it, 29.5 minutes BBC Two slot, and so it's just interesting to see those extra bits. But it is weird to be watching Red Dwarf without the laughter track. But obviously this is the only season that can... Well, no, this and then Back to Earth are the only 2 that were shot in this fashion. And then obviously had the laughter track dubbed on afterwards with an audience. Up next, Stoke Me a Clipper.
Arnie, I want you to become the next Ace Rimmer. I mean it, Arn.
Are fevered rantings one of your symptoms?
The universe needs a chap to look up to. Someone to right wrongs. And just generally be brave, handsome, and all-around magnificent.
And you think I'm your man?
It's your destiny, Arnie.
What, to wind up looking like a reject from a gay pride disco?
Which aired on the 24th of January 1997, written by Paul Alexander and Doug Naylor, directed by Ed Bye. Ace Rimmer returns to hand the reins over to the extreme cowardice of Arnold J. Rimmer. Is he up to the task, or will he smeg it up? My first exposure to this episode was a show called How Do They Do That? And this is actually an extra on the DVD somewhere. And it was a show where they used to kind of go behind the scenes of how stuff was made. And this was following the model unit blowing up the Nazi plane at the beginning of this episode. So I saw that years and years and years before I actually saw the episode, and the context of... I didn't even know who Ace Rimmer was or anything. So I have very fond memories of that. And it's a fantastic opening to an episode. It has a fantastic orchestral score. Again, I love the extra on the DVD for Series 6 where Howard Goodall talks about scoring this episode. So it has this epic feel, and it's also very, very funny. Red Dwarf can just about get away with a latex crocodile, and I think as a story, it's slightly unbelievable given what a weasel we've been led to believe that Rimmer is. And how the whole Ace Rimmer thing was set up back in Series 4, as that they are these two very divergent versions of the same person. But I think it is a fitting way to write Chris Barry out of the series, and he does a very good job. I mean, it's an acting masterclass from him. He's playing Ace Rimmer, he's playing Rimmer, and then he's playing Rimmer trying to be Ace Rimmer. And so he's got those 3 different performances going on at the same time, and I think he does a great job. And although it's let down by the lousy CGI at the end, that ending where they go and see the forest of coffins that make up the rings of a planet, I think it's also quite moving at the end as well. So yeah, this is another one that I really enjoy.
This is probably my favorite episode of this season. Because, yeah, like you were saying, that opening with the crocodile surfing and all the James Bond stuff, that was really funny.
Yeah.
Same, Rimmer. You're outmanned and outdone.
You expect me to concede?
No, Mr. Rimmer, I expect you to die. Okay, take him into the hold. Take 10 minutes to explain all our plans to him, and then throw him out of the plane.
And the scene you talked about with all the millions of Ace Hardlight drives out in space, that was my favorite scene. I love that. The music and everything. And there's also a couple of guest stars in here that I noticed. One I didn't know at the time, and now I do. Brian Cox was the king, and Sarah Alexander was the queen. She's from Coupling and Worst Week of My Life, if you've ever seen that. That's a hilarious show.
And she's now Jonathan Creek's wife in Jonathan Creek.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The 2 or 3 specials. No, they did. That was it. I think they did a special and then they did a series, and she's his wife, and plays it very well. I think back at the time she was known for a comedy series. Was it Smack the Pony? I don't think I'm making that up. There was like 2 or 3 women. It was an all female sketch show that she was probably better known for at the time. But then, yeah, Brian Cox. I mean, the original Hannibal Lecter, star of X-Men 2. I'm trying to think what else has he done in recent years. The first 2 Bourne films. I mean, he's a major film star, and here he is in an episode of Red Dwarf playing the King of Camelot, which is just crazy.
Is there any man across the length and breadth of our great land that dare challenge the king's best knight?
I do, sir.
Then you are, sir.
Lister of Smeg.
Bring me his manhood on a silver platter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's genius.
Yeah, there were some really funny scenes in this one. The steed cheat, where the horse and the rider got really small, and Rimmer banging his head on the console when Ace showed up.
And how can you beat riding a pet alligator instead of having a parachute? Like, come on. See you later, alligator.
Yeah, right.
Well, it has the air of the preposterous that has always surrounded Ace Rimmer's exploits. Though most of what Ace Rimmer does, you only hear about from Ace Rimmer after the fact. But this you actually get to see. I mean, quite how he has ended up in World War II, trying to rescue the Princess Bonjela, well, I don't know. But it's just I think it just works.
And it's
absurd.
In an alternate dimension, of course, too. So it could be at any time. And I just love when he's on the motorcycle and he shoots the gun at the princess, and like one bullet just happens to completely free her, conveniently.
Yeah. But then he carries on shooting it, and then it runs out, and so he just chucks it away.
Mm-hmm.
It's that Great Escape / Indiana Jones style motorbike chase. That I mean, it's so full of cliches, that scene. But yeah, I think that's why it works. Why we love it.
And the Germans talking, well, wow, we're lucky
Yeah.
to be alive because that was Ace Rimmer. We could have been killed, and then they get hit by the alligator falling out of the sky.
And then the guy's like, well, I don't know. What's the German for what a guy? What a guy. And those two guys who get the crocodile dropped on their head, they're in a documentary called The Aces Head of Red Dwarf, which is again on one of the DVDs, and they're talking about how they're these really serious actors, and they end up getting a crocodile dropped on their head. It's very, very funny. But yeah, one of the other scenes that really sticks out is the flying carpet scene, where he's like, "This is where you come to become Ace Rimmer. You're the cougar, Arnie. Can you see the cougar? Can you see it?" And then he just sees the hamster round in the wheel. He's like, "Yeah, sort of." And again, it's one of those great Chris Barry scenes. He's carrying the whole thing himself and playing these two different versions of Rimmer.
Rimmer doesn't buy it. He doesn't buy it whenever Ace is saying it to him. I think that eventually Rimmer has to buy it because he gets kind of backed into a corner by Lister.
Yeah. Well, and then the death of Ace. Like, once Ace is gone, he has to keep up the charade to try and convince Crichton and the cat that he is Ace Rimmer and that it's him that's died. And he isn't very convincing. Hence the title of the episode, "Stoke Me a Clipper." He can't even get the line right.
Right.
Well, sentimentally, my favorite scene would be that all of the cast does Rimmer's ridiculous salute at the end as part of his funeral.
Next up, Ouroboros.
What is it, bud?
Ouroboros? It wasn't our Rob or Ross, it was Ouroboros.
What was?
The message that was written on the side of my box.
You came in a box? That explains everything.
I know who my parents are. I know who I am. I understand now.
Explain, sir.
The in vitro tube, the one Kachansky's got. The frozen embryo. It's me. At some point after the baby's born, we must go back in time and leave me under the pool table at the Egbert Arms. We wrote Ouroboros on the box to explain. I'm my own father. And Chris is my ex-girlfriend and my mum.
You should write a letter to Playboy, bud. I bet you anything it'll get printed.
Which aired January 31st, 1997, written by Doug Naylor and directed by Ed Bye. The boys accidentally cross over into a parallel universe and rescue Christine Kachansky, who's now stranded on Starbug, and Lister finally discovers the identity of his parents. Remember back in Series 3, and the last day, where Crichton is about to be terminated, and Lister tells the story of being found under a pool table and never knowing who his parents were. So that's finally explained in this one. He's his own dad. And Christine Kachansky joins the cast, sort of, I guess, taking Rimmer's place. And also her backstory is rewritten a bit. Because, in the old series, in the first couple of, because it's so different. You kind of see them as two different. Kind of like new and old Doctor Who, kind of, in my head. But, in the first couple of series, she never gave him the time of day. The whole scene where she's looking down the front of her shirt and she's like, "Oh, I've seen something you haven't." And now they're saying that they dated for a little while. So yeah. Continuity is not the greatest in this show.
Well, I think that I can't remember that was introduced earlier, wasn't it? At some point, in maybe series 3 or 4 or 5 that they dated. I think.
Right.
I think that's where but yes, their continuity has always been off, and obviously, and then now they decided, bringing her into series full time, that not to go back to Claire Grogan, but to recast completely. And she, to me, she does feel like a very different character from the brief snippets that we saw of her before.
Mm-hmm. They didn't do a whole lot to develop that character before. I mean, she was just there as kind of a object of Lister's affections, and used more as a plot point rather than a full-fledged character. So it's great to see that they give her a chance to blossom into a full cast member at this point. Crichton gets a new personality in this one because there's conflict has been removed from the crew because of Rimmer's departure, and there has to be a new source of some of that conflict, and it's because of Kachansky arrives, Crichton feels like less of a person because he's going to all of a sudden be replaced by, the woman of Dave's dreams.
Crichton, man, are you okay? I just know we're not going to be able to get rid of her. Is that so terrible? She's going to take you away from me. I just know it. What? I took her a glass of milk when she was showering. I've seen her naked. So? She's got all those in and out bits that you like. Right, no matter what happens, you and me, we're compadres, amigos. But that's all gonna change if she stays. You'll end up liking her more. I won't. You will. I won't. You will. I won't. You promise? I promise. So if she walked in here now and took all her clothes off and said, "Ew, make love to me, you horny dude," and I said, "Oh, perhaps you'd prefer to fold some sheets with me instead, sir," what would you do?
What kind of sheets would they be?
Well, those nice cotton ones with the pattern.
What, the blue stripy ones or the green square ones?
The green square ones.
So it's making love to Kachansky or folding sheets with you? Can I do final folding stuff?
Absolutely.
But the sheets then.
And she's standing there all naked with all the in and out bits going all inny and outy.
With the sheets, Crichton. You and me, hospital corners.
Really?
Too true.
You're lying!
Did you think that was a little out of character?
They're changing the character, so I guess it's Crichton's new character, which I really think, persists through the rest of this season and even into the next one. He goes into that high-pitched, whiny, cryy voice.
Yeah.
You're lying! I'm going to be alone like I was in the Nova 5. Yeah, for me, it doesn't quite work.
No.
It's kind of funny for maybe one or two gags, but
it got really annoying after a while.
It got very annoying very quickly. Yeah.
I can see why they did it, but at the same time, yes, I don't appreciate the change. Crichton should be just Mr. Butler the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it works to a certain extent in Beyond a Joke, which obviously we'll get to later. But yes, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't work here at all. I don't think. No. And it's difficult to know because Doug Naylor talks about introducing Christine Kachansky as a step on the road to the mythical Red Dwarf movie, which never ever materialized and almost certainly now never will. So you can see why he did it from that point of view. And obviously, yes, Chris Barry's just left, and so they need another character to fill out the complement. But it totally changes the dynamic of Red Dwarf, and it does become a very different show. Those first two episodes which we talked about do feel much more like the Red Dwarf that we're used to, and then this is just a very different thing. And from my point of view, much less enjoyable. I mean, I don't hate season 7 with the vitriol that some fans seem to, but it is, it does. This is where it starts to go a bit wrong, I think.
And then from this time forward, things change, and there's not a whole lot of explanation. I mean, we get to the end of this, and there's some continuity between the end of this season and the beginning of the next series. And after that, it just kind of all goes out the window. And, cast members come back, okay, Series 9. Now, a lot of this stuff is like melding together for me, but is at the beginning of Series 9, isn't Rimmer a hologram again?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's just no explanation of that because he's brought back to life for Series 8 and he's a human, and then we go back to the way things were in Series 1 and 2. Yep. So that's just one of those things I guess we kind of have to gloss over, right?
Yeah, and if you haven't seen Series 10 yet, but there is a throwaway line in Series 10 to the cliffhanger at the end of Series 8. They don't explain it, but they reference it just so that you know that we're still in the same post-Series 8 timeline. They don't explain how we've got back to the point of having those cast members and why Rimmer's a hologram again. But you just have to accept that that's the case. And I'm quite happy to do that because I'm not really a sucker for continuity. I'm much more happy just to say, well, they're telling me a story that I'm interested in, or in the case of Red Dwarf, they're telling me a story that's funny. So that's fine. But yes, the continuity really does get very screwy here. And although we now know how Lister in our universe ended up under the pool table, we don't know how the Lister in the parallel universe ended up under the pool table. So it's still very confusing to me.
I haven't thought about that.
That whole idea of the infinity paradox where Lister becomes his own father and therefore humanity will never become extinct because he's going to continue traveling round and around. I think that's just brilliant. It's
fantastic. Yeah.
It makes a kind of lame transitionary episode very cool, and it reconnects to a lot of scenes that we've seen before.
Yeah, and it does make for a very funny episode in Series 10, which I won't spoil, but it's to do with Lister being his own dad, and it's very, very, very funny.
Excellent.
So, and Danny John Jules' nephew playing the baby Lister, which I think is a nice touch.
Oh, okay. I didn't notice that. That's cool.
The baby Lister even has like a big, frock of matted, nasty hair too.
Yeah.
With the dreads going on.
Yeah, no. Danny John Jules, he explains on the DVD that he came into the production office one day, and there was a picture of a very, very dark-skinned baby, and he was like, "What's this?" And they were saying, "Well, that's the baby that's going to play baby Lister." And he's like, "Well, yeah, but Craig Charles is about 15 shades lighter than that. I'll just ask my brother, and we'll use his baby." And he does look. He's a very good, convincing. Yes, I can believe this could be baby Lister. No, I do have a favourite scene actually. I think I love the crossbow scene where she's like, "Hello, I've decided to stay on one condition, that you rescue me," and then they go and shoot her through the leg with a crossbow bolt. Which I think is something that many fans would actually quite enjoy doing. I have nothing against Chloe Annette. I think she's great, and I think she's great in Series 8. She just is a bit annoying in this series.
Yeah, she doesn't seem to fit in this series. Yeah.
Up next, Duck Soup.
So what's steering this crate? Is autopilot down too?
Everything's down. Oh, I wish I'd been more careful.
You mean this ship's careening out of control through space with absolutely zero expertise at the helm?
No change there, then.
Which aired February 7th, 1997, written by Doug Naylor and directed by Ed Bye. After a massive power failure, the only way to escape the room the crew are trapped in is to make their way through Starbug's ventilation ducts, and someone is claustrophobic. Now, who knew that Starbug had ventilation ducts? This is what they call in the business a ship show. And it's a great way of shooting a bunch of scenes of dialogue and not have a lot of sets and not have a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. It saves money in the mid-season. I know that ship shows saved the original series of Star Trek and stuff like that. Even the first season of Doctor Who, there's a ship show. So it just happens once in a while. My version of this one did not have a laugh track either. So it seemed like out of place. I know that there were places in there, and now that you've explained it, why. There's places in there where the laughs should have been. And I can hear them in my head still, because when you come up with lines like "to pee or not to pee," totally.
92 degrees. God. I want a drink, but I can't be bothered to get up. I want to go to the loo, but I can't be bothered to go down the corridor. This is one of the universal dilemmas. Something which has confronted all men since the beginning of time. To pee or not to pee, that is the question.
And even the slapstick with Kachansky versus the pipe, and just
that is hilarious. Yeah,
the horrible sound effects. It's totally. It's got to be. I want to say it's Craig off. He's the one recording them probably. The ear in the all the kind of stuff. It's totally someone with a microphone just making up sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. This is much better. And obviously comparisons are made between this and Marooned. Obviously Marooned is a much superior episode with Lister and Rimmer, but there are some of those conversations in this where they, for various plot reasons, pair up the different characters to have a heart-to-heart. And particularly Cat and Lister is like, if I was dead, you couldn't swing me in here. Which is, I mean, in fact, that almost gets lost in a laugh. So I think there are some lines in this that do benefit from not hearing the laughter track, because then you can actually hear the lines. And I think this was the last one that they shot, because they were running out of money and they couldn't make the Cat episode where he has to have sex or he'll die, which sounds like it would have been funny, but they ran out of money, so we got this instead. But I think this one works much better than the previous one. And the scene with Kochanski and Lister, where she's trying to take his mind off it again, you start to believe in their relationship in a way that previously I don't think you had.
She has him going there too with the whole other Dave is gay and has himself and all that kind of stuff. And then there's even the moment with between Kochanski and Crichton with the rusty gate.
Oh, that's
hilarious. That's just hilarious.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that part. That's hilarious.
And then Lister explaining why he's claustrophobic is very funny. Stepped out bollock naked into the Bootle Amateur Dramatics Players production of Importance of Being Earnest. And I mean, so my dad is from Liverpool, and so we used to go and visit my nan regularly when I was a kid, and you would always see a sign for Bootle, and so I knew of this place, and so so for me it's a place that I can fix in my head and go, yes, I can imagine young Lister being there in Liverpool and being being kidnapped by this jealous husband and stuck naked into a box and then decanted into the middle of a stage production. Just the image is very, very funny.
Yeah, my favorite scene of this was where the Cat and Lister were talking about claustrophobia, and the Cat's trying to understand what it is, and he just keeps talking about it. Lister's like, "Well, you shut up."
You're born that way, or you're just kind of sissy. Yeah. I mean, I do feel that overall the Cat is a bit sidelined in this series, but he does have some individual scenes where he really shines.
They always say the hardest part about leaving cyberspace is realizing the whole universe does not revolve around you.
Sure doesn't. It revolves around me.
Absolutely.
I'm serious. Look at the evidence. What evidence? Take food. Until I bite into it, it has no taste. Even when I know what I'm going to say, it never bores me. You and you alone. And here's the clincher. All of the interesting things that ever happened to me happened when I was in the room. Coincidence? Get out of here.
Yeah.
We saw in the last series them trying to expand upon his character, give him responsibilities, all that kind of stuff. And even like during the transition of a lot of these characters, we can kind of see that he's almost reverting back to just being the lazy, self-grooming, self-effacing, like, hi, I'm the Cat, you should serve me because that's what my job is to just be served.
Yeah. And he's a bit thick as well. Which episode is it where he talks about bringing himself up? It was like, nobody else could bring me up. It was particularly slow on Thursdays when I had double nothing. And yeah, it's weird because he then... And it's obviously just it's there's no way around this because otherwise he'd just be too alien. But he makes references to things that we'd know about all the time, and then you go, well, how does the Cat know about that? Maybe he's just watched a lot of videotapes. That's probably what it is, isn't it?
That would make sense, especially since there was no one around.
Yeah. Next up, Blue.
Master of the wit and the repartee, his command of space directives is uncanny. How come he's such a genius? Don't ask me. Harold Rimmer, he's also a fantastic swimmer, and if you play your cards right, then he just might come around for dinner.
I never want to see or hear from that scum-sucking lion, weasel-minded smegger in my entire life.
Sigmund Freud, eat your heart out.
Which aired on the 14th of February 1997, written by Kim Fuller and Doug Naylor and directed by Ed Bye. Lister is missing Rimmer in the worst way, and it's up to Crichton to cheer him up by taking him on the ride of his life through the Rimmer experience. Bad idea. Sorry. Yeah, no, this is good. I mean, again, I like this because Chris Barry's back, if only briefly, in it. And that again, you've got that antagonistic dynamic between Kochanski and Crichton, and both of them trying to solve Lister's blues, and Crichton winning through at the end with the Rimmer experience, which is one of the funniest things. The Rimmer Munchkin song is just absolutely hilarious, and the kiss as well, where just that bit where it's set up as if this is just the next scene. And so until that moment where they cut and you realise that he's been dreaming, you're like...
Dave falls out of bed.
Yeah, it's beautifully edited, that scene. Beautifully edited. Yeah, very fun. But then you then know you have to well, okay, this was a dream, but Chris Barry and Craig Charles actually had to do that in the studio. And the way they talk about it in the documentary again is very, very funny. Where you can't quite tell how serious they're being about how much they enjoyed it. But yes, no, I think this is one of the better episodes of the 6 after he'd left, as it were, because he comes back.
I think so too. It was really good to see him again because, well, he's my favorite. But I remember being really disappointed that he was only in 3 episodes, and so I was right there with Lister, like missing Rimmer and all that. As far as the funniest part to me, I love the whole Rimmer experience and the Toodle Pipski sign at the end of the ride. But the funniest part to me was when Crichton was trying to give instructions to Lister and he started shouting at him in German.
Yes. I'm sure this will help, sir. I'll just insert my hypnotherapy disc. Now, just relax.
Wir müssen ihn konzentriert haben, du Scheißkerl!
What the hell? Sorry, sir. Wrong disc. That was my German language course. An extract from Hitler's Nuremberg speech. Definitely hypnotic, but not in the right way. I'll just go and find the proper one.
For his relaxation session, right?
Yeah, and he's got the wrong disc in, yeah.
That's awesome. There's a little cutaway in this one where they're playing golf on a low.
Oh, yeah.
And Lister just steals the ball and is like, okay, no, here you go. It's gone all the way around the planet, so you can keep looking for it. Have fun with that.
Yeah.
I guess where it comes from, this episode is probably the most domestic. Like it's more sitcom than sci-fi drama at this point. This is one of those episodes that's it kind of stands out as different from the rest of the series in that aspect, that it goes back to more of just these are people that are hanging out, complaining about where to put the salad dressing away.
Yeah.
And that's a big point of contention rather than are we going to be blown up by some, horrible alien or something like that.
Hold me back. Hold me back.
I think we all agree about the Rimmer World segment. That's probably our favorite scene in the whole thing. And boy, what a segment, that's some serious budget probably went into creating that, and it really kind of turned everybody's stomach, I think.
Yeah, and then you get the CGI versions in Series 9 in Back to Earth. Very briefly, you get those little Rimmer Munchkin dolls when they meet their creator. So, I mean, I think it's a slight shame that he didn't, for whatever reason, he didn't sing the song himself, and that he's lip syncing to Howard Goodall singing it. But aside from that, it's beautifully executed, and I think again there's a longer version of the song on the DVD. There was like an extra verse which they had to cut from the episode because for timing reasons, with more rhymes for Rimmer.
Up next, Beyond a Joke.
But you might learn something. Of course. Silly of me. After all, you've always been a big fan of penetrating 19th century observations of middle-class manners. I mean, just because you own a T-shirt advertising the rock band Colostomy Explosion doesn't mean you're not a master of erudition.
Which aired February 21st, 1997, written by Robert Llewellyn and Doug Naylor, and directed by Ed Bye. After being kidnapped by a rogue simulant, Crichton finds he has a brother and discovers a disturbing revelation about their creator. This one goes off into sci-fi land again. One of my favorite things is the special effects that go into Crichton's head exploding. And, especially more than once. Like, it was very cool and very thought out. And this is jealous Crichton to the nth degree, because he just takes it and takes it and takes it and is beyond jealous in this one. And it really kind of blows his top, literally. I don't really get the whole Pride and Prejudice world thing. Like, I'm not sure of how giggling girls defines, proper etiquette. I don't know if you have a different kind of point of view on that one, either of you guys.
Well, I grew up watching those things because I have sisters and a mother, all of whom are obsessed with those things to a greater or lesser degree. In fact, I spent yesterday with my sisters. Love them. And to me, it feels like a parody that's written by someone who doesn't really know the source material very well. Because it doesn't take those characters very seriously, and they are a lot deeper than giggly girls who are after Mr. Darcy or whatever. So I don't think that aspect of it quite works. But at the same time, the juxtaposition between that and Crichton coming out of a lake in a tank, works absolutely wonderfully in the episode.
Takes them out systematically with blow darts and snare traps and like that, log attached to ropes that's going to swing down and knock people over. Like, just the amount of malice that goes into that from Crichton. It's a very, it's a deviation from his character significantly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's clearly incredibly pissed off. And it's an interesting development for the character. And obviously written by Robert Llewellyn, so written, or at least in part, by the guy who was playing him. And so he talks on the DVD about the fact that the way he'd written it, Crichton's head blows up very near the beginning, and he doesn't actually come back till very near the end. So he was trying to write himself out. And then when Doug Naylor got hold of it, he ends up having to play two versions of Crichton. So sort of backfires on him.
And this one almost seems like two episodes, because we've got that whole leading up to the conflict, and then we go off in a completely different direction with the simulant spaceship and the Gelfs and all that kind of stuff. So it really does seem like two separate episodes that are kind of stitched together by the same conflict.
Do you think that works? That's the question.
I guess so. It worked just fine as far as the transition between the two. And then, of course, yes, we get the other version of Crichton, Abel, who's the drug-addicted moron, which possibly fit in better with the crew that we already have.
Yeah, and again, Robert Llewellyn talks about the fact that that's based on the fact that he had good friends who were drug addicts and who had got to the point of one friend wasn't able to help them, and that they needed to be given professional help. And so he's clearly writing some of his own experience into that version of Crichton. And I suppose as Stoke Me a Clipper was very much Chris Barry having to do the two versions of Rimmer and doing it very well. Robert Llewellyn does a very good job of doing Crichton and Abel in this. And obviously you realise that they're the same actor, but he does give you two very distinct characters of this same model of android.
Yeah, you almost forget that it's the same actor sometimes because they're so different. But yeah, the rogue simulant on here is Don Henderson, who was in Delta and the Bannermen.
And Star Wars.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, he's in the famous round table scene on the Death Star where Darth Vader first shows his force chokey thing on the guy on the other side of the table.
Oh,
he and Leslie Schofield, who has also been in Doctor Who, are both on the other side of the table. and he actually has a line in that scene, and then Leslie Schofield has a line later on. So yes, that's I did a thing on my podcast actually about how many people in that scene have been in Doctor Who, and if you count Peter Cushing, obviously playing Doctor Who in the movie, there's even more. So yes, a well-respected British actor comes in to play quite a small role actually, and with lots of simulant makeup slapped on his face. But he's very good with it, I think.
I had to turn the subtitles on for him because the way that it was mic'd or just the way that he spoke, it was almost indecipherable for me.
I think that was his years of smoking had finally ruined his voice, so by all accounts. Which is a shame, because if you rewind 10 years and he's in Delta and the Bannermen, he gives a very gruff voice performance, and in Star Wars as well, 10 years before that. But yes, clearly the cigarettes had not done his vocal cords any good.
Well, funniest line in here to me was actually had nothing to do with Crichton. It was when Kochanski totally bombed on a joke about Hugh.
They're all missing their primers.
Well, this Johnny won't help us. Simulants hate everything human or humanoid. In fact, anything beginning with a Hugh.
Probably hate the third largest city in Vietnam, then.
Why's that?
Because it's called Hugh, dummy. Well, actually it's pronounced Hua, but if I said Hua, it wouldn't have been as funny. Any navigation conference anywhere, they would be in the aisles with a quip like that.
You're probably trying to get out the building before you quipped again.
Yeah. That's the kind of joke that would have appealed to me if I had known that piece of trivia. I'm all for a pun, and I love the. Do you want any help with? Do you need any help, Crichton? He ain't heavy, sir. He's my brother. Which is a big fan of the Hollies. I very much appreciate that reference.
And Crichton also discovers that Professor Mamet designed the 4000 series as a joke after an ex-lover that she hated named John Warburton. But, yeah. And Lister convinces him that he's not a joke, beyond a joke, in fact.
Well, that's some nice continuity as well, because we'd seen Professor Mamet, or at least we'd seen a siren being Professor Mamet in the previous series, telling Crichton to get into the waste compactor and crush himself into a cube. So it's nice to have some more backstory on her, kind of linking those together for those with a long enough memory. Given that this was 3 or 4 years after there'd last been a series of Red Dwarf, but for the fans, it's a nice little note.
It's a nice note, but is there any synthetic created being that is not created in somebody else's image? In any sci-fi anywhere? Data is, the image of Noonien Soong, and the Doctor in the Voyager is an image of his creator, and it's just like, hi, can we create a monster? Not a monster. Can we create a android or a synthetic being that is not necessarily like created in someone else's image? Like, it always just seems like such a place to fall back on.
Yeah, Chameleon in Doctor Who, he's the other way round. He's a shape-shifting android who's constantly being other people, but his basic robot form is just a generic robot thing.
And he doesn't have a whole lot of backstory either, so that's a good way of getting out of that way of just falling back on that kind of a story.
But you're right. Bishop, I suppose Bishop in the Alien series as well. He's revealed to be based on a real person, isn't he? So yes, I suppose it is a bit of a trope. It is a bit of a trope, and it's interesting because when we first met Crichton, he's played by a completely different actor, and he has a completely different personality. So again, continuity is completely shot to hell when you think about it in those regards.
Right.
Because in the series continuity prior to this, the reason that he is played by Robert Llewellyn is because they couldn't fix him properly, and so he ended up with a different personality from the one that he'd first had. So, yeah, it's all a continuity mess.
Yes.
Next up, Epideme.
It's the Epideme virus, sir. A man-made parasite created as a rival to the nicotine patch. Epideme was an intelligent organism designed to block all neural signals relating to nicotine craving. But in practice, it also blocked the signals telling the body it needed blood and oxygen.
Is that why the common chick looked like the centerfold from this month's play, Zombie?
Precisely. It's virtually unstoppable. For the first 48 hours, it consumes its host, then hijacks the corpse and goes looking for a new victim. When it can't find one, it freezes the body and waits.
So, the life signs on the Leviathan
didn't belong to Carmen, but to the parasite inhabiting her body, which passed to you the moment she,
Slipped her mouth meat down me gullet. I've been tongue hockey to death.
Which aired on the 28th of February 1997, written by Paul Alexander and Doug Naylor, and directed by Ed Bye. After being tongue hockeyed to death by a zombified ex-crew member, Lister contracts a fatal virus, and the crew go to drastic measures to save him. Yeah. The voiceover guy, what a voice the virus has. I can't even do an impression of him. I mean, he must have a vocal range the length of a piano keyboard. He's very, very, very funny.
Davey, let's run down the rules. If you win, you get to live. If I win, you get to die, and I take all your knowledge when I kill you.
What, you absorb knowledge from every person you kill?
So as you can appreciate, killing you ain't exactly a career highlight. No offense, but when you're a virus, there's not much call for knowing how to open a lager bottle with your anus.
And again, he's on the DVD talking about all the different voiceovers that he does. So I like that, but it is a very, as they point out, it is a very static thing. It's like if you're talking to this virus, you have to have this green thing with the eye, almost like the Lord of the Rings, and so it feels almost like a Big Finish audio concept, really, a radio player, the kind of thing that, yes, if Radio 4 did sci-fi on a weekday, I could be driving along in the car, turn it on, and this would be what you get. But then obviously we do have also those incredibly gross visuals of his arm being chopped off.
Yeah,
which is it's very well done, but because it does make you feel it made me feel a little bit sick when I first saw it. I was like, that is gross.
Yeah, and decaying body when the woman climbs into bed and kisses Lister, and her face falls off, and it's just nasty.
Yeah, very nasty. My left arm, I said. My left arm, I said. What kind of navigation officer can't tell left from right?
I do all my favorite things with my right hand.
Yeah. And when Cat comes in and tries to shake his hand, and yeah. So and again, it's an interesting sci-fi concept. And the twists and turns of Lister is going to blow himself up, and the virus is right. It's very perceptive. It's like we know Lister. He's not the kind of guy who will blow himself up in a suicidal attempt to destroy a virus. And the way that the virus then tricks them into allowing it to carry on before being finally tricked by Kochanski. So it's one of those things where you just go, how are they going to get out of this? How are they going to get out of this? And then it's actually quite clever the way that they resolve it, I think.
You were talking about the voice of the virus. It reminded me a lot of Talkie Toaster. I don't think it was the same guy, but it reminded me a lot of him.
Yeah, no, I'd not thought about that. But yes, in terms of the setup of having this usually inanimate thing being able to speak, there's a similarity there.
Paul, what do you think about this one?
There's a bit of continuity that does go all the way back to the first season with Future Echoes, because when we see the old version of Lister, he's got a robotic arm. And this, would say how he lost his arm and stuff like that. Of course, all that goes out the window in the next few series. And even in
the next episode.
But, we can at least, put those pieces together that, one version of Red Dwarf, he doesn't get his arm rebuilt, and he's replaced by a robotic arm that conveniently opens beer bottles for him.
Yeah. And then he lives till he's what? How old is he supposed to live till? He's very old though, isn't he? In that episode.
And then my favorite was the arm gag at the end as well, where Kochanski chops off parts of her arm, but it's really not her arm anyway, and just the reaction of everybody around going along with that.
Yeah.
Mine was the one you mentioned before, where Lister gets his arm cut off and the cat comes in, "Hi, buddy," and goes to shake his hand. And
Yeah. And again, it's nice to see them venturing out into another spacecraft, which is, again, production-wise, very well done, with the ice, the fake ice, making it look like they're on this frozen planet with all these corpses around. The only thing that doesn't quite work is that the block of ice is clearly not a block of ice. It's clearly made of some kind of plastic, and then it becomes a bit of ice when it breaks apart. But I suppose there's always been an element of suspension of disbelief with Red Dwarf's effects, in the same way that Doctor Who has. This is sci-fi on a TV budget, and occasionally or in some cases frequently the edges will be seen.
And now our last story, Nanarchy.
But they're nanobots. They can change anything into anything else.
Yeah, they can take a pot noodle and turn it into food.
So they took Red Dwarf, made a subatomic version, and turned the rest of the atoms into a planetoid for safekeeping.
But what was it we spent months chasing? What was producing that vapor trail? Red Dwarf. Did someone just turn over 2 pages at once?
We were chasing the nano Red Dwarf. That's why the readings were so minute and hard to pinpoint.
So now they could be anywhere. You pursued them across half the galaxy.
Until we finally lost track of the readings. Probably another scanner malfunction.
That, or they went somewhere out of reach of your scanners.
But we were gaining on them, Bud. How could they outrun us?
Scanners are programmed to scan on the outside. To escape, they just had to stop.
You mean the nanos could be in here? On board Starbug somewhere?
Hey, he could be right.
Which aired March 7th, 1997, written by Paul Alexander, James Hendry, and Doug Naylor, and directed by Ed Bye. In order to replace Lister's missing arm, Crichton attempts to find an army of nanobots to recreate it, along with a huge mining ship called Red Dwarf. First of all, I remember seeing this one for the first time and cheering in my living room at 2 different points.
I can guess one of them.
Okay.
I can guess one of them is when Holly returns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's Norman Lovett.
Yeah.
And the other one was when, the cat's driving up. What is this? And they see Red Dwarf and they play the original theme music. Love that.
Yeah.
Those were the 2 times. But I wanted to ask you guys something. I don't know if you remember. Were the nanobots, weren't they mentioned in Back to Reality? I know they were mentioned somewhere in the past, but I can't remember which episode it was.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time with that.
I don't recall. In my mind, this was the first time they were mentioned, but you might be right. I haven't watched the rest of Red Dwarf recently enough to have it fresh in my mind.
It was like one line. It was really like a throwaway thing, but I do remember them saying that. And I didn't know how far back maybe this was planned. I don't know if you had heard anything on like the documentary and stuff, because I haven't watched it.
Yeah, well, the implication is that it was a very fresh idea that James Hendry had watched a documentary. There's a long-standing series of BBC 2 documentaries called Horizon, which is just this. It's a kind of all-encompassing umbrella for these science documentaries that come on periodically. And he had gone to the trouble of getting hold of a transcript of the documentary on which to base this whole nanotechnology thing. So and obviously, given that this was the first Red Dwarf series in a while, the chances of having seeded that previously, well, it sounds like that would have been impossible. So if there is a line earlier in the series, then it's obviously a coincidence of some kind. Yeah. But apparently, once he wasn't then available for rewrite, so the script that we ended up with is again quite different from what James Hendry wrote. So, in a sense, it feels very much of its time, doesn't it? The kind of here's a new technology I suppose we're still developing nanotechnology, aren't we? Mm-hmm. But yes, it feels more of the moment than some of the other concepts they've dealt with, I feel.
I was just searching through the wiki trying to find any other reference, and the only other reference that would have been before this is an episode it's a lost episode, and it's like, okay, that's not going to help us by any means. An episode called Identity Within, and I haven't seen or read anything about that one. So
that's the one about Cat, which would have been in this series. there's a reconstruction of it on the DVD where Chris Barry does impressions of all the cast, and there's like storyboards covering the action.
That may be sitting in my mailbox outside just right now. I haven't gone out to get it. I just heard the mail person come through here, so pretty sure it's here now. I might have to check that out later today.
Maybe that's something we can touch on after we're done with the whole series, is go back and touch on some of the special features and lost episodes, as well as the books and audio and that kind of stuff that's out there.
Yeah,
he's back. Kicking bottom or what?
All right, well, that's Series 7. So anything you guys want to say about, the whole Series 7 as a whole, what you thought?
I think what works is the look of it. I mean, I am an aspiring filmmaker, and so whenever a TV show makes an attempt to look better, I enjoy that. I mean, obviously the CGI, which was a last-minute replacement for all the model work which they'd shot, which then didn't work because they'd rewritten the scripts, is really terrible and doesn't work very well. But the general look of the studio stuff, I think, is excellent. In fact, I don't think Red Dwarf has looked better since. Even now they're shooting it on HD. They are shooting. It's a much reduced budget this time round, and I think there's a lot in there that works. There's a lot that doesn't work. I mean, it's interesting to note this is one of 2 series that they made where they upped the episode count to 8. And I do wonder what would have happened if they'd stuck with 6, and it would have been a slightly tighter season, I think.
Mm-hmm. You can definitely tell that there's not poor writing that has been throughout the entire series.
Yeah.
Going with other writers, having some different ideas.
Yeah.
And this is definitely a departure from the Red Dwarf that we know. And I feel like Series 8 and 9 are trying to go back to what they always had, what worked for them before.
Yeah.
And that this was the great experiment, and maybe the great experiment didn't really work.
Well, part of that in Series 7 may have been because Rob Grant's not there anymore. Possibly.
Yeah, the ever mysterious professional divorce that went on between Series 6 and Series 7. Yes, obviously his lack of being there casts a huge shadow over everything that's followed from this series onwards. Yes, I think his presence is sorely missed. And it's weird because he makes the odd appearance in archive footage on the DVDs, but the story that we're told in the documentaries comes from the cast and from Doug Naylor, and it's always been a disappointment that we've never got to hear his side of the story as to what went on and why he left.
Yeah, I've seen almost all the documentaries from the first 6 series, and I don't think he's in any of them that I remember.
He makes one brief appearance in this one because there's a BBC 2 series called Comedy Connections, and they did a series of half-hour programmes about British comedy shows, and they did one on Red Dwarf, and they interviewed him. I think the whole of that programme is maybe on the Series 8 DVD. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's where it is. And there's a brief clip from that used on this documentary. But it's just a shame that his voice, when it comes to the official DVD releases, his voice is missing. Oh, I mean, I would assume by his own choice that he doesn't want to revisit that, and that for whatever reason their breakup as a professional writing duo was a very painful thing for both of them, and possibly one that is irreparable when it comes to their own relationships. But who knows? It seems that only the 2 of them really know what went on and why, and it's for the rest of us to speculate, I guess, or to give up speculating, really.
Well, to me, there's never been a bad series of Red Dwarf, but this is probably, if I had to pick a least favorite series, this is probably it. Probably because Rimmer's my favorite, and he's missing for most of the series. And in fact, the 3 episodes that he's in are by far my favorites.
Yeah.
But I guess I just didn't really realize how much of a team the guys are until one of them goes missing for a while. And But the other problem I had with this year was what we talked about earlier with Crichton's jealousy and all that. I got old like really quick.
Yeah.
And luckily, moving on, we have Norman back as Holly, because that when he appeared in the last episode, I was right there with you guys, as like shouting out loud, happy and very excited about his return, and he doesn't let us down moving forward.
No, he's by far my favourite Holly. I not that I have anything against Hassie Hayridge, but when she came on board was when Crichton came on board, and a lot more of the Holly dialogue ended up with Crichton, and so Holly became surplus to requirements. And so I think the strongest Holly stuff is the stuff in the first 2 series with Norman Lovett, and so to have him back is great. It's a pity that for whatever reason he has not been back in the most recent series, but I think that's, again, from what I've heard, that's possibly his own fault. Yeah, if only real life relationships did not scupper our enjoyment of the show. But hey.
All right, Luke. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
No, it's been a pleasure. Always enjoyable to chat Red Dwarf with you guys. Well, this is the first time we've done it, but it would be fun to do it again.
Where can we find your stuff?
The easiest place to find me is to follow me on Twitter, where I'm at Tmudwup. Or my YouTube channel, we just go to YouTube and Google for Tmudwup, and you will find episodes. As I said at the top of the show, I am in the midst of production on a new season of episodes, 8 episodes, 2 of which I have shot, and the rest are in varying stages of development. So hopefully these new episodes of Tmudwup will be arriving early August. I'm hopefully on schedule for that. And they will overlap with the return of new Doctor Who with Peter Capaldi, but I will not be, because I've already kind of written these episodes, as it were. I'll not be immediately commenting on him. We've got various things coming up, and there's a few trailers out there for the new series of Tmudwup if you want to look for them.
Yeah, I've seen them, and I'm really, really interested to see how your new title sequence is going to look.
That was the first thing I shot. I think I shot that in March. Leeson Fisher from the Doctor Who podcast has written me a theme tune, which meshes very well with it. He's hopefully working on a final mix for that as we speak. So it's, if you know his Big Finish tune from the Doctor Who podcast, it's sort of along those lines. I'm slightly trepidatious because it's been building for a long time, and I will love to see these episodes out in the wild, but I don't want to disappoint anybody. So, but yes, as I've mentioned, I've been whoring myself out to other podcasts in the meantime. So I've not been missing from the podcasting world. Just my own podcast has suffered a bit.
All right. Well, coming up next month, Red Dwarf returns. The crew encounters a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and Crichton gets his own TV show. But that's for next time.
Yeah.
Say goodbye, Paul.
Goodbye, Paul.
Say goodbye, Luke.
Goodbye, Luke.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Tongue Tied, a Red Dwarf podcast. Red Dwarf, the song Tongue Tied, and all associated material are trademarks of Grant Naylor Productions. No infringement is intended. You can email the podcast at tonguetiedpodcast@yahoo.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tonguetiedpodcast. And follow us on Twitter at tonguetiedpod. For the boys from the Dwarf, this is Paul Towsley saying,
Gadabble, diggle, doggle, niggle, foggle, nibble, nay. I'm trying to say I'm tongue-tied, tongue-tied, whenever you are near me. I'm mummy, 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 whenever you're...
Honey, up for a stroll.
Thanks for the offer, but I'd rather smear my genitalia with fish paste and dangle them in a pool of hungry piranhas.
I'll take that as a no, then.
Your type isn't Kachansky, Listy. It's someone called Tiffany. Someone who drinks Campari and soda and wears orange crotchless panties. Someone who thinks dealy boppers are funny. Someone who says something instead of something. and laughs like a freshly wounded moose strapped to a cement mixer.
This from a man who's had less sex than a lettuce.
Oh, ha ha.
Remember, people who say ha ha have no sense of humour. They just can't think of a witty retort.
Oh, ha ha.
You know the news? All the curry supplies have been destroyed.
We heard. As a mark of respect, we thought on Sunday at 12 o'clock we could have a minute's flatulence.
Princess Bonjela, Ace Rimmer. There'll be time for explanations later, and hopefully some sex.
What a guy.
ROCpodcasts.com.